With the release of 1.3 coming out within a week, or at least within a week of this video being uploaded, I figured it'd be best to make a video on how to become, or at least get better at PvP within the division, and essentially just some tips that can point you guys in the right direction. A couple rules of thumb that I'm going to be getting out of the way is obviously to have max armor, have good rolls. At the time of this video, SMGs should be mained. I'm not sure what weapons are going to be good, especially when 1.3 comes out, whether it be LMGs or ARs or whatever. But right now, maining an SMG is the best thing that you could do, especially with responsive or brutal or deadly or whatever, but that goes for any other guns as well. Your secondary should be a marksman rifle or a shotgun or whatever you prefer it works, but I would suggest using a marksman rifle, at least for right now. The talents that you want to be running are combat medic, even if you're solo. You should always obviously know why. Triage if you're with a group, but if you're not with the group, then critical save for that extra damage resistance when you pop that med kit. One is none, and on the move, so you can obviously stack that with the critical save. Obviously, if you do have the season pass, you want to get that paramedic and police backpack, as well as some Lone Star with not weapon mods, but armor mods that have extra ammo capacity, so you can put that stuff on, so you can get 7 med kits and an ass load of ammo. But the main points in this video that I'm going to be talking about, aside from those rules of thumb, are movement, skills, headshots and aiming, solo tips, map awareness, communication, how to counter in the tank meta, and how to be smart and careful. The first set of tips that I have regarding movement are strafing is important, because it is. If you don't know what strafing is essentially just moving back and forth and making it very difficult for your opponent to lock onto you, even if they're aiming down sights. If they're aiming down sights, then they can't move, so that's when strafing becomes golden. Because if they're having difficulties moving, or if they're hiding behind cover and their movement's limited, then essentially you can just hit fire and they can get roasted, even on console. It's a lot easier to do that on console if they're not moving. If they're moving, it's easier on PC. Well, on PC, hip firing is just, you should do it anyways, if you're close enough. If you're it's solid, I'd say maybe 20 meters or after that, aim down sights. Second tip is to use cover, but not really using cover in the sense that this game allows you to do. At least not yet, not until 1.3 comes out with LMGs and stuff like that. Then you might want to start using cover a little bit more. But what I mean by using cover is I mean by standing behind something that people can't shoot through. Don't hide behind like plastic sheets that are covering fences and shit like that. You can shoot through that, and that's not going to be fun. Third tip is to move with your team. If you're being left behind, then you're holding your team back, because essentially if you're lagging way behind, people are going to pick you off like freaking animals, dude. That's how wolves get you. They just kill the weakest link, but whatever. Anyways, fourth tip is keep moving. If you aren't, then you're dead. And essentially what I mean by that is if you stop moving and you're on a manhunt, then you're allowing other players to re-gear up, get ready to come after your ass, and if you're already moving, then you're fine, because that means that it'll take those players a lot longer to realize, oh shit, they're not here, better go whatever, and they'll be chasing you, and if they are chasing you, then you have the advantage, because you get to dictate them coming into your field of view, or field of an ambush, or whatever it is that you guys planning on doing. Last tip is to make circles around the map. If you start a manhunt on the north side of the dark zone, then you want to move north and vice versa. So you just go back and forth and stuff like that. This eliminates people spawning behind you from surprising you, essentially. So if you stay in one spot, people are going to just build up again, as previously mentioned in that last tip. So with that being said, map movement's key. There are some places on the dark zone map that you can, I guess, necessarily camp, and it will be okay. But then again, it really does depend on how many people are on the server and the skill of the server. The next set of tips I have are regarding your skills. There's two types of skills that I'm just going to be defining, one of them being really important. So the tier 1 skills I've defined as are Overdose, Booster Shot, Concealed Damage Pulse, Shock Turret, and BFB. Well, BFB is only tier 1 if you have enough skill power. Tier 2 skills are literally anything else. They don't really matter. They can matter, I guess, depending on certain situations, such as Seeker Mines that could be used to keep people from running, or if you're being chased, you can keep people from... You can just stall them, you buy yourself more time. But that's very situational. And the same could be said about BFB, but I feel like the BFB is used a lot more than, I guess, anything else regarding, things that can damage you. Like, Seeker Mines do damage you a little bit, but that's not really important. You can get creative with other skills, though, such as riot shields, and you can have a lot of fun. But meaning a riot shield isn't probably the best idea. Second tip is to use heal when you're on your last health segment, or when you're at least less than half health, to compensate for that delay of healing. It's annoying. I've died many times because I've just been sitting there with my pants down waiting for the heal delay to work. So you just have to time it right. I would recommend using it when you're at least half health if somebody's shooting you. Or you can just keep spamming it as soon as you get it with overdose. So if you're using booster shot, then use it when you're at least half health. I also want to apologize if you hear like a cat in the background. That's because there is a cat there. My cat's in here while I'm recording. I don't know, whatever. But anyways, conceal makes you very difficult to kill because it denies enemy players from roasting you over a campfire. So basically what Conceal does is it keeps people from getting that damage pulse against you, so they can't get that extra critical hit chance against you, they can't get that critical hit damage against you. It's just amazing. It really works. It pretty much adds extra armor to you, and your squad too if you're playing with a group. You also want somebody else to be using a damage pulse, because if somebody else isn't running a Conceal pulse, then make sure to punish them. If you have a lot of skill power, you're going to have a lot more crit damage and a lot more crit chance, and it's just going to work in your favor quite a bit. Somebody also wants to be running a shock turret, and if you're running it in a group, put on fear tactics, so that way you know to make sure that a group of players are stunned in place. And it's especially useful if a faggot keeps on rolling like a blunt in 420 in a Canadian smoke shop, because that's essentially what it's good for, is to keep people from rolling. I'm not gonna lie to you, I literally wrote down that joke because I thought it was funny. I still think it's funny. But yeah, you get the point. BFB is kind of at tier 1 and 2. It is situational, but it can be used to down some people who don't have any exotic damage resilience, but it can actually bring someone's health low enough to kill them easily if they do have exotic damage resilience. And essentially that's all that matters, right? So also be sure to use that talent Chain Reaction to have increased damage against other players if you're that team's dedicated sticky bomb. And lastly, be sure to obtain resistances such as shock and burn resistance, because those will help you quite a bit. I think if you have at least, 30% shock resistance, shock turrets don't even, phase you anymore. And burn resistance is good because then you don't, if you get set on fire, it won't last nearly as long, and a lot of people use that even if they don't need to. Like, if it's like a 1v1, they're just going to use them anyways. But you shouldn't use it. You shouldn't use incendiary rounds just because you suck at this game. That's essentially the point. You want to use them strategically. If you're in a 1v4, then you should use them. If you're outnumbered, that's when you should use them. Not because you suck at this game. But also, bleed really isn't that important. But also, as a pro tip that I should mention, is that if you're under a status effect that's, burned or shocked or something like that. Actually, I don't think shock only applies to you in, a couple seconds, and you can't really move anyways. But you get the point. If you're bleeding, burned, blind, or whatever the hell it is, if you go into one of your friends' heals, or an overdose, or whatever the hell heal it is, it actually removes that status effect. It can be your own heal, but you can't pop your own heal if you're burning. But if you're bleeding, you can, and that'll just get rid of it. The next set of tips regard headshots and aiming. Well, headshots are pretty easy and pretty straightforward. Just be sure to aim for the head as much as possible. There are certainly quite a bit of players that don't, but hitting in the head is the #1 way to get the most damage out of your gun. If you're not aiming at the head and you're hitting their feet or their freaking moose knuckles or whatever the hell it is that they have, you're missing out. You're not going to kill them. Even if you do, then they must be really bad. Or you're doing a lot of damage, but either way, you'd be doing a lot more damage if you're hitting them in the head. On calls, try to hit fire, but work on it. So practice. I just had a stroke there, sorry about that. But yeah, practice hip firing on console. It's very difficult. Even some of the best players still have a hard time landing good shots. But do it when you're running or chasing after somebody, because essentially they're not really moving on that much. If you think about it, if you're chasing behind them, if you're running Predator's Mark, you can just pop that. But they won't be bleeding for that long because they'll probably heal anyways. So just be sure to at least try to land in good shots if you can. If somebody is within a 10-meter radius, you should always aim down your sights, if and only if you have more health. The point of a 1v1 or a gunfight is to survive, not to die. If you're losing more health than the enemy player is, then you need to stop aiming down sight, roll out of the way, heal up, do whatever. That's essentially probably one of the most important rules I could ever tell any of you guys. The final tip is on PC. The hip firing is much easier to do, so to work on strafing, it's going to be a lot easier to do that. But, again, just hip fire if you can. Hip firing is really good. You have a lot more movement options than you can, because if you're aiming down sights, you can't really move nearly as much, but just be sure to strafe whenever you guys can. The next set of tips are essentially solo tips, and the number one tip that I can give you regarding solo is conceal. Always run conceal if you can. So you should have a heal, whether it be overdose or boost a shot, and conceal, and obviously the survivor link ult. Yeah, conceal is pretty straightforward. I've already mentioned it before. It should be straightforward. The next tip is emphasis on survival. You're on your own, so the number one thing that you can do and focus on is not dying. You're literally just watching your own ass. So essentially what you need to have as, I guess, run some nomad pieces, enough to get that 20% health on kill. I think it's 20%. I believe it is. Just so you can, kill ads really quickly, so you can get 20% of your, I repeat, of your health back. So if you have an ass load of health, you get that shit back, boy. You know what I'm saying? You don't have any other teammates to help give you health back, so you'll take any help that you can get. The third tip is to keep hauling ass. If you stay in the same spot, you're going to die. As mentioned before, this is definitely on a more grandiose scale. You essentially are against the whole server. So that's you against 23 other people. So assume that you have 23 people chasing you. Maybe you can take them, maybe you can't. Always assume the worst. That way you can, be prepared. So just keep hauling ass, keep going north if you can. Avoid 5 and 6 if at all possible. If you are there, just avoid subways and bomb spawns, but that's pretty straightforward. I guess you can sprint through them if you want to use your ult, if you have to, but that's in emergencies. But I would recommend just using your ult against 1v4s. That brings me to the next tip, is to avoid 1v4s if you aren't confident enough. If you have to fight, then be sure to use your ult offensively and make it count. If you have the option to run, obviously do that. If you aren't confident enough, that's the thing. If you can take them down, at least focus on one enemy, because once you do that, then you make it a whole lot easier for you. Because if you think about it, if you're in a 1v4, you take down one enemy, that's 1v3, and then a 1v2, and then a 1v1, and by then the odds are statistically greater against you winning. Not against you, but you get the point. They're in your favor, essentially. Next tip is to use cover, or as some people would say, cut the cake. So dip out, so you expose less of your body, as shown here. As you can see, I stick my head out slowly against this enemy, but I think what I imagine what he's doing is he's realizing that I have increased my probability of winning because I am exposing a lot less of my body than he is. He's essentially just running at me, and I'm going to be able to do more damage to him than he will do to me. Next tip is to use grenades around corners to bait them in. So essentially, as you're baiting somebody in around a corner, use a grenade. That way you can use your environment to help you. You need to play it smart and make the least amount of poor decisions as you can make. So if you use your grenades, whether it be shock or whatever the hell it is, that way you can use your grenades to help you. Essentially, your grenades are your teammates. Treat them that way. Treat them, with a grain of salt. They are there to help you. Just make sure that you place them in the right way. So it takes a lot of practice to do that. And the final tip that I have for you guys is probably one of the most important, is to be patient. If you're on your own, you don't need to worry about supply drops, because you're not going to get them. Let's be honest. You're not going to be able to get the good supply drops. You can probably get lower supply drops, but you're not going to get anything good. So, time is on your side, and I think that's probably one of the most important keys that you can remember, is to remember that you don't have to panic, you don't have to worry, you have all the time in the world, essentially, to fight however many that you are able to fight, essentially. But don't get too cocky. If you get too cocky, then you make shitty decisions, and if you make shitty decisions, then you die a lot more than you should. The next set of tips that I have are regarding to map awareness. So essentially, just be aware of areas that are taken down. If you're running through boss spawns and trying to stay hidden on the entire map, then be sure to leave at least one enemy left to keep the area from turning gray, so that way you can stay hidden. So if you're trying not to get spotted by rogues on the map that are keeping track of, okay, this spawn's up or this spawn's down or whatever, that way it stays purple so people don't know where you're at. And the opposite can also be true. If a boss spawn turns gray near you, then you know that there are players nearby. So you should also keep track of what spawns are up and what spawns are down, or what ones are coming up or whatever. As a group, you should also be aware of players that are flanking you to the left or to the right or ahead or even above in some places. Just so that way nobody has to jump on you, because me and I guess another one of my friends have managed to get the jump on a group of 4 easily, and we've melted them. It's the element of surprise is so useful in this game. It's unbelievable. If a group of more than 6 or 7 arrives, then you should probably run with your group of 4, unless, of course, you can roast them faster. If you can take them down pretty quick, then you don't really need to do this tip, but it helps if you're having a hard time, then take them to the AI grinder so they can thin out and you can take them down a lot easier. So just be aware of that. Final tip on this is to be aware of AIs, because they can seriously fuck you up. If you aren't being hammered, then have at least one guy be on ads duty. And hammered being by other enemy players. If you just need to shift priority to, players and someone on AI, or if it's just mainly players, then focus on players solely. Don't worry about ads. But if they're being a pain in the ass, then obviously kill them and stuff like that. But you don't want to just focus primarily on ads alone, because if you're doing that, then enemies are just going to take you out. The next step is probably one of the most important too, is communication, and my number one tip here is to talk about everything. Talk about where you are on the map, where you want to go, what's going on around you, how many AI are there, how many people are coming. Essentially just treat the manhunt like an MLG tournament. Like if you've seen Call of Duty tournaments or Halo tournaments, just talk like that if you can. And just remember that your team is your radar. Your team will communicate to you, or at least a good team should communicate to you where AI are at, if they need help, what's going on, all that stuff. They should give you all the intel in the world. But what things do you need to communicate about? Well, you need to communicate when you're using a skill, or ask for a heal, or ask for an ult to be activated, but be sure to call out when you're using it. Otherwise, you can have multiple ults activated, and you'll end up losing a lot more than you're gaining with them. Also, let your teammates know if you are moving or rotating around the map. So if you want to move up to the north or back down south or wherever it is, make sure your teammate knows to move with you. Also, this is another big one, is don't yell at a teammate. If shit hits the fan, your team is absolutely all you have. So you need to rely on them, and they need to rely on you. Nobody wants to play with a piece of shit. That's all I can say. Also, if you don't have any friends to play with, and if you're a fucking faggot like I am, use LFG to find a team to play with and to get better with, essentially. So you can just keep playing with the same guys and get better both individually and as a team. And lastly, just to have fun. I mean, going manhunts is all about having fun. I mean, at least for me, winning is fun. It was a lot more fun than just, having a good laugh or two. Next tip is regarding the tank meta, or just tank builds in general. Again, as 1.3 rolls out, I'll make videos about how to actually play each of the gear sets individually, once I get enough of the set pieces. The first rule is that if they have a high amount of toughness and have constant heals, then the best way to deal with them is to team shot. Regardless of how much toughness they have, having 4 skilled players shooting at you or using a turret can help tremendously. Again, use everything you have against a tanky player. If the tanky player keeps healing their teammates, then use incendiary rounds, use everything that you have against them. But just be really weird, because odds are if you start using incendiary rounds, they will too. So be careful about that. Just keep constantly dropping heals, just be prepared for that. Second tip is, as it may make you a bitch, but again, incendiary rounds are very effective against tanky players, but also be sure to focus on one player with your team for maximum effectiveness. So like, just team shot one player, preferably the tanky player. And lastly, if all else fails, and this is like the last thing that you should do, is just find a new server. If a team is better than you, and you're having a very, very hard time, you shouldn't keep going after them if you keep losing gunfights. The point is to, obviously, if you do keep dying, pay attention to what you're doing wrong, and then, change servers if you want. If you don't want to, and if it's about pride, forget your pride, is what I'm trying to say. Because if you get too prideful, you're going to make mistakes that you normally wouldn't do. Your team isn't perfect, no matter how good you are. No, it doesn't matter how much time you have spent in PvP, there will always be at least one team that's better than you on a server. So if you want to, you can change a new server, but if you want to stay and test your luck, then you can. The last set of tips I have is just regarding on how to play smart and how to be smart, essentially, in this game. Every decision, even a small one, if it's based off of too many assumptions, then don't do it. The best decision to make is the one with the least amount of assumptions, i.e. Occam's razor. So this could be applied to, moving to a place where there's a checkpoint. Assuming that, there's players not there is kind of an assumption already, and you should always assume that there are players at checkpoints, but that's just to be safe. So again, just don't make decisions, whether it be a micro decision, or it's like a really small decision, like, maybe I should go left, or maybe I should go right, or maybe I should go to this extraction zone or whatever. There's always some amount of assumptions that need to be made regarding if you're avoiding another group of players, or if, let's say, they make a mistake, or to be looking for a certain mistake that an enemy team is making, or something like that. I can't really list off like certain decisions yet, but you should always be aware of, like, okay, just be careful about how many assumptions you have to make about a team decision that you're going to have to be making. The next tip is, just because you're in a group, a stupid decision can still be fatal. So on an individual scale, certain decisions can, obviously affect you either drastically or not all that much. But with a team, a decision, say, let's go this way, and there's a giant, 20 players are already there ready to rust your ass, then that's kind of your own fault. So that can still be fatal. There are some decisions like, okay, maybe you should run, say, a riot shield instead of, like, say, a shock turret. That's not a good trade-off. You're going to be losing a lot more than you're gaining, but I don't know any team that would be like, hey, can you trade off your shock turret for a riot shield? Yeah, no problem, bud. You're going to have a really hard time working around that, because you're essentially trading off a means to keep somebody from rolling around, or a tanky player from healing or anything like that, at least for a couple seconds, for the riot shield, which essentially just absorbs bullets, and that's about it. Third tip is to avoid checkpoints and safe houses after roasting. So if you kill a whole bunch of players, avoid checkpoints and safe houses that are nearby. In fact, run away in the opposite direction, so that way your team can regroup and get ready for the next set of roasting, because they're going to be coming out and they're going to be pissed. I almost said mad there, but pissed probably fit it better. This can also be said for you. If a teammate is dead, or if multiple are dead, then be sure to call out where you're spawning, or to ask where they are spawning, so that way you can meet up with them, so you can ambush them or regroup with your group. And also, just to have a plan B in case shit hits the fan. So if teammates die, just be sure, like, hey, I'm going to this street, I'm going there, or I'm going to the hallway of death, or whatever. Essentially just have a backup plan. And the last tip that I have for you guys in this video is, if you split up, then meet somewhere or bait enemies to, your group for an ambush. Or just go rogue, just start shooting at a group of people, and haul ass to your group so you can pull off that Assassin's Creed level ambush with your group with snipers ready to go, so you can just wave the hand and all of a sudden the whole teammates drop. Well, the enemy teammates will drop, I'm sorry. So, yeah, that's essentially all the tips that I have for you guys for today. Again, this isn't going to encapsulate all the tips that you can do to become a PvP god in this game, but what it does allow you to do is it gives you building blocks to start for, you know, maybe new PvP players or players that, you know, want to know where to work on their foundation so they can build up, because obviously there's an infinite amount of ways that you can improve as a player. So this is just something that I want to give you guys to look out for, to make sure that you guys know, that say what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right. And I've spent countless hours being in PvP and stuff like that, so I've definitely tried to use all of these tips that I can. And I'm probably going to be going solo rogue a lot more often now, just because it's a lot more fun, and I feel like it is more rewarding, so that way I can get better at individually as a player. But again, as the new 1.3 gear sets come out, I'll collect all of them, and I'll show you guys how to play each of them in a PvP mindset, and maybe a PvE. Even if it sucks, I'll still show you guys how to do it. Although some of them maybe I can't, like say Final Measure, because Final Measure is just like, why? Well, maybe I can try it. It'll be a good challenge, I feel. So, but anyways, I hope you guys liked this video. If you guys learned something new, please leave a like. If you didn't, then comment down. If any of the tips that I made are incorrect, or if you can feel like you can improve them, then please leave a comment down below. Again, constructive criticism, I'll definitely appreciate it. But as always, thanks for watching.